Formula One is looking to revamp the point structure, and it could take effect from as early as next year if it gets approved. Teams joined with the FIA and F1 management this week for a gathering of the regular F1 Commission in Geneva, the teams joining via video conference. There were many topics debated, including technical and sporting matters heading into the future, but one of the main points on the agenda was a shake-up to the F1 point structure. Back in the 90s, there was only 10 points available for a win, with only the top 6 drivers getting points. In 2010, the current point system as we know today was adopted with 25 points for a win, 18 for second, 15 for third, 12 for fourth, then 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, and 1 point for 10th. In 2019, there was also the addition of a point for the fastest lap. It appears that some of the smaller teams, though, have been lobbying for a change to the system to offer them more to fight for. Currently, in Formula One, there are 3 teams that haven't scored any points this season: Alpine, Williams, and Sauber. Haas has 5 points and RB have 7, so there's really 5 teams in and around that area. As it turns out, though, Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari, Aston, and Mercedes have all been regular candidates for the top 10, with most of them being incredibly consistent. The midfield teams are having to fight tooth and nail just to get the opportunity to maybe get 1 point on a weekend, and that's really dependent on one of those top 5 teams messing up. The proposed point system wouldn't change the points at the front, but it would rather spread them out a little bit better towards the back end. From 1st to 7th, the points would remain the same in the new proposal, but rather than the points dropping from 6 to 4 to 2 and 1, they would reduce by 1 from 7th place all the way down to 1 point for 12th. This would mean there would be more opportunities for the smaller teams to have good races, finish 11th or 12th, and still come away with points at the end of the weekend. There are 2 ways to look at this proposal. The first is that points should be hard to get. Getting into the top 10 needs to be hard, and even though currently it's incredibly difficult for the lower teams to get points because the top 5 are so consistent, it should be that way. It has to be hard. This is the pinnacle of motorsport. That's one train of thought. The other is that ensuring points are given all the way down to 12th means that the smaller teams will always have something to fight for, even if they're running in 11th place. It would also mean that if they were to scrape into the top 10 for whatever reason, let's say 9th, they'd actually get 4 points in the new system, which is double what they would get in the current one. If I'm being honest, I don't see a downside for this. It's not really shaking the points up at the front at all, so it's not going to affect the big teams. Instead, it just gives a bit of an interesting fight for the constructors for the smaller teams, meaning instead of 3 teams getting 0 points, they might pick up a point or 2 points here and there, and it keeps that fight going at the bottom of the constructors' table. It also really rewards consistency. Some teams could be performing really well, but if the top 5 teams have a good race weekend and are consistently finishing in the top 10, you might have a team that's always finishing 11th, just off the points. Well, this new system would reward them for that consistency. It's also worth noting, though, that Autosport.com have said there is not set to be a unanimous decision for the proposal, but only 6 out of the 10 teams need to approve it for it to go ahead next season. So I want to know what everyone thinks about this. Should it go ahead? Like I've said, I think it should. I don't really see a downside to it personally. It doesn't mess with the points at the front, so I can't think of a reason why it would be detrimental. What do you think? Do you think it should go ahead? Let me know. However, there is a problem. We know this could be voted in, and we know that would then mean that next year this would go ahead. However, I suspect that most of the teams will reject it. If you think this through, you need 6 teams out of the 10 that would have to approve it. I suspect the struggling teams would be all for it. Alpine, Kick, Williams, Haas, RB. Let's say, and we don't know that they would, but let's say they all agree to it. That, however, means they would need one of the other teams to push this over the line, one of the top 5 teams. You'd have to have McLaren, Aston, Mercedes, Ferrari, or Red Bull. You'd have to have one of those teams to also approve it. And I will bet money that they'll want to keep the slice of the pie to themselves, because sadly, that's how it works at the top of the table. Maybe I'll be proven wrong and one of them will think that it's better for the sport, but it wouldn't surprise me if those 5 teams all reject it and the proposal doesn't really go anywhere. Now, no decision was actually made this week on the point structure, either for or against. It turns out they need a little bit more time to digest the proposal. It looks like now another meeting is going to be held in July where they'll talk about it further, and then perhaps then we'll actually get an understanding of whether this is going to go forward or not. I think for the smaller teams in the sport, it's a good thing, but let me know what you think. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you next time.